Our topic today is situational leadership. The purpose of situational leadership is to develop individuals, in other words, the people who work in your organisation or your project team, to reach the highest possible levels of performance in relation to a particular goal or task. So the model states that leaders, and that includes managers, supervisors, anybody in a leadership position, need to first focus on an individual's needs and then adapt their leadership style accordingly. The model seeks to avoid the mistake that many leaders make, and it's a surprising number of leaders, of thinking that their people should adapt to their leadership style, or that one size or style will suit everyone. It won't. It doesn't. Down that path lies a poorly motivated and sometimes unskilled team. So that's what we would seek to avoid. And situational leadership is an excellent model for making sure that we're mindful of our people's requirements, their needs, their development levels, and we'll get to what a development level is, and then adapt ourselves to that. So let me tell you a brief story. Many years ago, I had a contract working for Barclays Bank in their high net worth division based in Canary Wharf in London. It was mostly very enjoyable. I worked with a team of other trainers, and it gave me the opportunity to travel around to the Barclays offices in the UK and train up bankers on a new client management software package that they were launching. Part of the work was preparing the training materials, of course, presentations, handouts, system guides, and so on, to go with the training courses to help the bankers to get to grips with their new software. On several occasions before we launched the training, I was asked to present the different workshops that we had created to a group of bosses in the Canary Wharf Tower in London, so that they could give feedback on how the content related to what the bankers do on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, these presentations turned out to be a rather frustrating experience for me, as I was instructed on how to structure my presentation by several of them, who clearly had no experience of doing this, and included asking me to move images on a slide which would not have made one jot of difference to understanding the points made, or changing a single word in a script. Since I'd had a lot of years under my belt at that point as a corporate trainer, you might be able to imagine I did not take well to being told how to do my job. This happened on several different occasions, and the way my team found of dealing with the inevitable, sometimes misguided instructions was to take notes very earnestly, nod and say, "Oh yes, good point," and then afterwards ignore all the irrelevant advice given. So what does situational leadership and the model consist of? There are really two main parts to it. The first one is the individual's development level, consisting of a competence element and a commitment element. So first we need to consider this individual's development level. By the way, the term development level is used in a specific way within this model. It has nothing to do with how intelligent people are or anything evolutionary at all. Note that the development level relates to a specific goal or task, and this is quite an important point. So let me give you an example. Your colleague may be great at putting together online marketing campaigns and enjoys being good at it, so she's self-motivated. On the other hand, she really doesn't know how to solve issues related to the website and does not enjoy that side of things particularly, even though she is part of a team responsible. In this particular case, that would lead to two different development levels for the same individual. And then the leader, having deduced what an individual's development level is, then they decide on applying a particular leadership style most appropriate to develop and motivate that individual. And according to this model, the leader's leadership style is made up of a directing element and a supporting element. Note that these two steps are sequential. First comes the top one and then the bottom one. We're going to go through each of these levels, each of these steps in turn. So here we have a diagram representing the development level of the individual. It's in 4 parts, and according to the situational leadership model, this model has hard borders, but people don't. So it's a useful model in us thinking through the development level that people may be at, but it doesn't exactly represent reality. So the message here is be flexible, keep paying attention. Somebody may, in a particular instance, in relation to a particular goal or task, fall in between one of these borders on this diagram. Let's start on the right-hand side with development level D1. So this is called the enthusiastic beginner. Do you remember starting a new job? Or how about a new role within an organisation? What was that like? How did you feel? And what was your level of skill in that particular role, that new role? D1 individuals tend to be unskilled and inexperienced, but also they tend to be curious, optimistic, enthusiastic. If I were to use the analogy of a person learning to play a musical instrument, then this stage is characterized by starting to take lessons, and at this point being mostly unskilled but enthusiastic. Development level D2 is called the disillusioned learner. So the disillusioned learner is finding the going tough and potentially overwhelming. They do have flashes of competence, but make mistakes too. They can feel daunted by having too much to learn, and maybe they're feeling confused or demotivated or frustrated. So in terms of our musical analogy, this would be the point when a learner realizes how much there is to master and how much hard work it's going to take, and they can become discouraged or demotivated. Development level D3, the capable but cautious performer. This person is becoming more and more competent in relation to the goal or task, knows what to do, but lacks confidence to perform at a higher level. They might be self-critical, they might even be bored or apathetic, but they can contribute meaningfully and productively. In terms of our musical example, this would be the point where somebody has gained enough skill and has practiced in order that they are ready to perform, but they lack the confidence to get up and actually do it. And D4 is the self-reliant achiever. They are justifiably confident, consistently competent, and seen by others as an expert. They work autonomously, but may be called upon to do too much due to their reliability and/or speed. So in terms of the musician, this is the level of mastery. Now you can see in the diagram there, the top part of the diagram, that we have combinations of competence levels and commitment levels. And this will feed into the next diagram. What I will remind you also is the development level is goal or task specific. That's an important point. So what I'd like you to do just for a moment is think about an individual in your team and a goal or task. Which development level would be the best fit to describe them in relation to the task? So, okay, that's a rhetorical question. I don't necessarily need you to answer, but I'd like you just to think of a real example for you. So moving on to the next diagram. Here we can see the development levels at the bottom of the screen. So that's the diagram that we just dealt with. And I've added the leadership styles graphic above that. There's quite a lot to take in here, so I'm going to give you just a few moments where I shut up in order to study the graphic. The relationship between the colours and the numbers in this slide are deliberate. So I'm just going to allow you just to have a look around that for a moment. So in the top part of this graphic, we have the leadership styles described. And there are two dimensions. So there's the x-axis of directive behavior here, low to high. And then there's the y-axis of supportive behavior, similarly low to high. And the combination of these two axes give an indication of the leadership style that should be adopted for best effect when related to all of, each one of the development levels below here. So directive behavior in this context means telling and showing people what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and providing frequent feedback on results. So this is the leader's role here, is some level of directive behavior along this axis. And then the supportive behavior axis represents listening, facilitating self-reliant problem solving, encouraging people, praising people, and involving them in decision making. As you can see, there are 4 leadership styles consisting of 4 different combinations of those 2 sets of behavior. So let's look at each of the leadership styles in a little bit more detail. Firstly, the leadership style called S1. So this is called directing, and this is the style to use when dealing with an individual at the development level of D1, the enthusiastic beginner. It's characterized by a high level of directive behavior by the leader and low level of supportive behavior. So the leader provides specific direction about goals, shows and tells how, and closely tracks the individual's performance in order to provide frequent feedback on results. This individual is already motivated, so more supportive behavior isn't going to be particularly helpful. For example, facilitating self-directed problem solving or a lot of listening. The leader's main focus here should be on being direct, structured, and clear on what's required. So going back to my musical analogy, when a learner begins taking lessons, they obviously lack the knowledge and skills to play the instrument, but they're often really motivated and excited about learning. The correct approach for the teacher, in other words, the leader, is to give them clear instructions, set goals, monitor their playing, and correct mistakes without focusing so much on praising and encouragement. Secondly, we have leadership style S2, which is the appropriate approach to take with development level D2, the disillusioned learner. The term coaching here, used as a description of this level, is a label used in this model for this leadership style and may not correspond exactly with what you think of as your own coaching style. It's characterized by a high level of directive and a high level of supportive behavior by the leader. So in this style, the leader explains why, solicits suggestions, praises behaviors that are approximately right, and continues to direct goal and task accomplishment. Remember that the disillusioned learner needs to be both supported and directed, as while they have some knowledge and skills, they may not yet be competent, and they may be finding it tough going. In the example of learning to play an instrument, once the individual starts playing the instrument and they learn how much they need to master, it's easy to get discouraged, even though their skill is actually developing a little bit. So the best approach here for the leader is to continue giving clear instructions and making corrections, while at the same time praising them for what they're doing well and encouraging them to see how far they've come. Thirdly, we have style S3, which is called supporting, and which fits well with the development level of D3, the capable but cautious performer. So here we have the leader demonstrating a low level of directive behaviour and high level of supportive behaviour. The leader and the individual make decisions together. The role of the leader is to facilitate, listen, draw out, encourage and support. In our musical analogy, as the musician becomes more and more competent, there often comes a point where they are actually ready to perform by themselves, yet they may be afraid that they aren't ready to put themselves out there. If the leader gives a lot of direction here, it doesn't really get to the heart of what the issue is. The individual knows how to do what they're supposed to be doing, but lacks confidence in themselves. So listening, encouraging, asking good questions that help the student reframe that situation, and joint problem solving are the best approaches here. And finally, of the four, style 4, delegating, which is the approach for development level D4, the self-reliant achiever. So this is characterized by a low level of directive behavior by the leader and a low level of supportive behavior. The leader here will empower the individual to act independently with appropriate resources to get the job done. Sometimes the leader's most effective approach is simply to get out of the way. And using our musical story, if the student musician keeps working at it, they reach a level of mastery where they need very little guidance or encouragement. Their motivation comes from within, and this is where very little direction or support is needed from the teacher. So there is a summary of all four leadership styles and how they relate to those development levels that I discussed a little bit earlier on. So what questions do you have about this model, please? You can either unmute yourself or you can type the question into the chat and we'll look at it from there. What questions do you have?
Hi, Justin. Mark here.
Hi, Mark.
I was just wondering what limitations you think the leadership chart has, and if there's anything you think, any gaps that you think it misses.
The situational leadership model is quite specific in terms of the context in which you use this. So we're talking about an individual who is considering one person that they're working with and that person related to a goal and a task. So it doesn't come across every situation that a leader might come across, for example, communicating to a large number of people. On the other hand, I honestly haven't found many situations in which this model wouldn't in some way be helpful. Do you have a specific example or thought about this yourself, Mark? Are you thinking through a particular situation?
No, not really. I was what you said about applying it in certain situations, I guess is what I'm thinking of. If there is the right time to use this as opposed to the wrong time in other scenarios.
Right. Okay. Yes, I would think if you're thinking of one person, you are the leader, and you're thinking of one individual in your team, or maybe in your project team even, and what it is that they need from you in terms of leadership. I found this to be an extremely useful model. What might happen is it might lead into something else. So it might lead into a particular style of coaching or other activities. However, as an indicator of what a leader's most effective behavior could be in dealing with one of their team members, I found it to be extremely useful and enlightening for some leaders. Some leaders can also find it slightly daunting and scary, because they realize that there are parts of the leadership spectrum, if you like, that they aren't employing. So some of the actions on this diagram here that we've got in front of us, some of the individual actions that leaders can take, some leaders realize that they don't do these things at all. Not the whole thing, but individual parts of this. So it leads them to think about, well, okay, so how do I need to expand my repertoire of actions, behaviors, in order to reach everybody that I'm leading here. Thank you, Mark. Does that answer your question, Mark G?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And Mark Gilson on the chat has asked a question. Praise and encouragement not featured so much in S1 and S4. Any background reasons for this? Perhaps S4 might feel patronized. Yes, indeed. Well, exactly so. Yes, specifically in S4, the what's that style called? I've completely forgotten now. Delegating. The individual in that case doesn't need any of this, and patronizing them or taking up their time when they're a self-reliant achiever is not what they want. They simply want to be left often to get on with what it is that they're good at doing. And minimal praise and recognition, whilst important, is probably the right level to pitch it at. I have come across people who are very, very expert at what it is that they do, and they complain that their manager's calling it into an office for a one-to-one every week, where they really don't feel the need for it, and they just want to be left to do what they do, and they know they do it well, so they just want to get on with it. In terms of S1, yes, exactly. The supportive behavior also includes, apart from praising and encouraging, the supportive behavior also is characterized by involvement between the two people. However, what S1 really is about, and what the D1 development level really needs, is very clear instructions about how to move forward, sometimes in very, very detailed chunks. They're probably quite enthusiastic, they're eager. If we remember ourselves when we've started a new job or a new role, we're usually very, sometimes even excited about it. So we don't need a lot of encouragement, praise, whatever. What we need is clear direction from the leader about what it is that I've got to do, sometimes even just within the next hour or just today or whatever else. So they don't need a lot of that supportive behavior, but they need very clear directions. Does that answer your question, Mark Gilson?
Yeah, I just unmuted. So I can say,
Great.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what I'm thinking about is new people joining the team or the teams that I work with, and you
Okay.
can kind of see this cycle quite clearly. In fact, we talk about a 4-stage process in terms of training people on any particular task
Yeah.
that moves them from one-to-one to somebody doing a task, and then it's reviewed in detail, and then finally when they get to S4, they're the next one training the next new joiner.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this model kind of makes a lot of sense to me.
Indeed.
In terms of the praise, the only other thing that I've heard in relation to training elite athletes is that surprisingly, when you're dealing with them, a good coach apparently gives between 4 and 5 pieces of, I suppose you call it general or maybe personal encouragement, versus 1 piece of specific technical advice in terms of how they perform. So I thought that was interesting in terms of people that might be at S4, maybe they're at S3, I don't know.
Right. Okay. That is interesting. I don't remember reading that particular piece of research. So if you have a link to that and you would like to send it to me after this, then that would be very interesting. I'd be very interested.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'll try and find it. It came up on a teaching course that I went on. Somebody who works with British gymnastics, and it was quite surprising feedback, really, isn't it?
Well, yes, interesting. Yes, definitely interesting. And we have a model here, situational leadership model. A model is an approximation of reality in order to help us understand and think through a specific situation. So it isn't reality itself. So to say that this is the truth, nothing but the truth, and the only truth is clearly wrong. It's a useful model, a tool that we can use in order to understand our situation and what we should do next. However, it's not foolproof. It's not any model is never foolproof.
It seems very good. It ties in with my some of the stuff I've seen, so that's great.
Okay, cool. And I'm sure are doing.
Yeah, on a good day, yeah.
On a good day, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I'll mute up now. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Marks. Does anybody else have an observation or a question about this, please? Now is the time.
Yes, hello, Justin. Can I just ask, given our current situations of working from home, I've very definitely got people in my team who sit within the D1, D2 area, and we've been having a lot of discussions about how we support them and continue to develop them. Have you got any suggestions or ideas of how providing this very structured environment can work in our remote working environment that we're now in and probably in for some time to come?
Yes, I would imagine that is the case, Jill, isn't it? Well, my suggestion would be, I mean, we have got somewhat used to working remotely in this particular way. Clearly, it's very different to being in the office with somebody, sitting next to them around a table somewhere, sharing a piece of paper and saying, look, these are your goals and what do you think, and so on and so forth. So we have to work harder at connecting with people, I think, and of course people understand this. If any of you have spent a long time on Zoom or on Skype, on video calls or whatever, you'll know that there's a limit, and it's not very long before you get very, very tired indeed. And the reason is for that is that you need to work harder at actually connecting with your people at a, if you like, quasi-emotional level, and really gaining engagement and rapport with them. It takes much more effort than if you're in the same room. So I think for leaders and managers, I think the lesson is to do little and often and keep in touch with people, especially those people in the D1 development level area, because they're more likely to need more direction than the people in the other areas. Similarly with S2, where you're doing coaching, you still need to be highly directive with people, as well as doing the supportive behaviors. And it's the supportive behaviors that can often drain your energy, the encouraging, the praising, the sharing feedback, and so on and so forth. So my advice would be do little and often. Don't have, I mean, my opinion of any meeting that goes on for over 90 minutes is pretty poor anyway, but especially when you're online, no, please, let's keep it to half an hour, let's keep it focused, and people can recover after that and have a little bit of downtime, and then they're back at work. So Jill, does that relate to your question? How does that sound to you?
Yes, no, that's helpful. Thank you. As I say, it's an area that we've been having some conversations around. So yeah, that's very helpful to get input. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. I do have a supplementary question though. In your particular situation, I'm just asking because I'm interested in this. Do you have shared boards online? So by that I mean something like Trello or a Kanban board or whatever, where you are all able to contribute to a plan or moving actions forward and stuff like that. Do you use that within your organisation?
We don't, but we're internal audit. What we do have is we have a piece of software which actually allows us to upload documents to it, and we can all contribute to those documents, share documents, and put comments on it.
Right.
So that would be the closest that we would get to what you're describing there in these situations. Okay.
There's one. Okay, thank you for that bit of context. Internal audit helps to understand your situation. There's something, and this, watch out for this generalization coming up. People that work in internal audit tend to be quite focused on concepts, abstract concepts. They're good at manipulating abstract concepts, and words are their currency, both written and spoken. What I have observed by working in different organizations is that those people, and this goes maybe for the roles of people who are adept at accountancy or financial analysis, that kind of area, is that in their communications they can sometimes miss the visual channel. So what we have in front of us on the slide that I'm showing here is a way of representing quite a lot of information visually. And this is sometimes what can be missed when people move from an office environment to a virtual environment, is that they still keep transacting in words almost exclusively, and they forget about the visual channel, which when you're with somebody is evident, but when you're online is not evident, and you have to work a little bit harder in order to get the visual elements into it. Some people are not particularly adept with so much with the words, and they like to understand concepts through visual elements. So that would be, now I'm completely guessing here, Jill, and mind reading also. So I don't know that is the case with you or your company or your team or whatever, but I'm just saying, just be mindful of the fact that some people like to understand things visually.
Yeah, no, very much so. I'm very much a pictures person, so it's one of my strong tools. Yeah, that's really nice to be aware of how people use things.
Yeah, quite so. Thank you very much for your question, Jill. Does anybody else have a question at this point? All very useful in thinking through. There's quite a lot of information here, so if you do feel a bit, well, I'm not sure if I've got this all, then great. You know, you're in the right place, really. What I'm going to do, just as a for the future, is I'm going to create, or am in the process of creating, an ebook which goes with this particular content, and I will make sure that everybody on this call gets a copy of that via email, and that's probably going to be next week. Okay, very good. So some final thoughts. People often ask, well, what can I do next? Okay, fair enough. I've got this information. It's interesting to me. I think I can use it. What do you think I should do next? So here are my 5 suggestions, and they are only suggestions. It entirely depends on you and where you are with your leadership practice and so on. The first one is to expand your range of leadership skills. I think it's true to say that many leaders simply stick with just one approach because, well, for one thing, they've been practicing it for so long, but also, unfortunately, because they're not interested particularly in developing themselves, or they say that they don't have enough time to do that. My question to them is, what if you were to invest in yourself? How much different would that be in terms of the results that you get and also the results that your people get? Secondly, when you are leading, keep your own emotions neutral. The job of the leader is to provide guidance, direction and support without adding their own emotional baggage. If you've ever had a boss, or maybe have a boss who is overly emotional and not necessarily in a positive way, then you'll know that that can on occasion be quite difficult. And individuals in your team are less likely to consider the ideas of a leader who appears to be operating from emotion primarily. Thirdly, develop your coaching skills. Learn strategies that motivate your team to be productive and effective. That is one of the most valuable things that you can do with your leadership practice, is develop your coaching skills. Fourthly, learn to read emotional states and development levels. That simply comes through practice. One of the big factors here, clearly, in using situational leadership is to recognize what makes your people tick. Then adapting your style to best motivate and develop individuals and encourage cooperation within your team is only going to pay dividends. However, you have to start with reading emotional states and development levels. And lastly, find models of excellence for the skills you wish to develop. So in this context, models of excellence are people who demonstrate a set of skills or attributes that you think would be useful for you to develop. And they have to be excellent at it. Don't choose a model of mediocrity. So this might be in terms of leadership, but it could be actually in any field at all. So look for those people, seek them out. Those people can be questioned and studied to extract their knowledge and their behaviors, their mindset, their beliefs. And if you can emulate all of that, then you will find that your results will tend towards theirs. So find people who you admire, who are fantastic at what it is that they do.